First thing we're going to talk about today is problems that people have with their websites. We all have a problem. We actually do love a problem, I think, don't we? Something to get the teeth stuck into, help people out when things go wrong. We do get a lot of people coming to us with issues that aren't even a client yet. Some clients also come across issues. Nothing is completely foolproof, and it's all about how quickly you can work to resolve them, isn't it? So should we talk a bit about the process of dealing with an emergency? Perhaps let's start with when you're not a client, what you might expect and what kind of advice we'd give to people who need our help.
Yeah, we get that a lot. Calls out of the blue, someone going, website's down, or it's like big media campaign coming up and we're not really sure that it's going to handle it. It fell over last time, it was on the BBC or something. And there's a few things that we generally would work through to establish what's going on, like what version of Umbraco are you on? Because Umbraco versions don't work as well as some others.
They've all got their own problems as well.
Exactly. So we'd work that sort of thing out, and then if it's really helpful if someone's got a specific example of something, isn't it? Something that's like, this has happened before, and we can go and look at the logs for it or see what's gone on, or if it's a performance problem, we can, tell us exactly what's going on.
And that's something to bear in mind before you've got a problem, right? Is to know that you want to take note of the time it happened, anything that happened around that.
Key things could be, you've just sent a big marketing email out, right? You're getting a lot of traffic, launching a new landing page for something, or any kind of development fiddling around in the background. Just be aware of what's happened recently so we can get all the information as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And then if they're not a client, back office access as quickly as possible so we can start understanding their site and what's in it and what it does and how it works from a user perspective. Then of course, knowing where it is important in terms of hosting, like is it on Azure, is it on Umbraco Cloud? How do we see those logs if we need to start debugging them?
Yeah, I think this is more often the case than not that clients don't have access to full admin privileges in the CMS. Maybe their existing agency does, or someone who built the website. Same for the code and maybe even for the hosting. And that is hugely problematic when it comes to us trying to help. There's certainly ways we can still work with it, but to get to an answer really quickly, it's best that we can get all that access.
It's like we always advocate for clients owning at least their logins, their infrastructure. They have the access and they delegate it to us. It's not the other way around. And that, we see that as normal and a good thing because it ensures business continuity, etc. But it's an important question for business owners, marketing managers, whoever owns that website for the business to own it.
And whoever's going to be there when things go wrong, when no one else is working, and making sure you've got access to the things that maybe your agency only works 9 to 5, and thinking about who has access to this information outside those hours.
I'm thinking back to some of the more successful problem solves we've done in recent times, where it was like a site that was recently migrated to Umbraco Cloud was crashing constantly, and they didn't know why, and didn't know why it has just suddenly happened as part of this cloud migration. Turns out the issue had already been there for a long time. It was some really inefficient use of code in the Umbraco Razor views. This client, it was their first Umbraco website, and they were kind of learning as they go, so they didn't necessarily know the best practices. But by us being able to get at that code like straight away, we were able to search for those common things in the code that we typically expect to cause problems. Things like using excessive use of the Descendants API in Umbraco is a very common one. Excessive tree crawling and excessive filtering data in memory, that sort of thing. And we were able to resolve it within a couple of hours by just refactoring some code to what would be best practice. There's actually a long-term solution that means they don't need all these caching layers or anything. And the site went from overnight being crashing every 15 minutes to like perfectly stable, not had an outage since, which is
nice.
a lovely win, isn't it, for a client?
Absolutely. So I guess what are the first things that people might be able to rule out themselves before coming to us? Are there some obvious things to check, things to be aware of, that would ultimately help people speed things up themselves before they need to call in the experts?
So one of the things is whether or not it's a repeating problem, right? So if you have sent out a mass campaign, you've never sent it before, you'll never do it again, and your site struggles, probably means your site's running at the right capacity most of the time. But if these things are happening again and again regularly, then we need to think about, overall performance, potentially different hosting and that sort of thing.
Being able to describe what down means is important as well. Like if they just say it's down, well, okay. And yeah, obviously we can go to the website, oh, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. That's the other thing. Like the amount of times I've had something come in and say, oh, the website is down. And I look at it, no, it's not. And they haven't checked, like, and it'll be there in, yeah, you their cache, or it's an internal network problem. I once had an issue where the website didn't work just for everyone in the building at that business and just their website. Long and complicated reason as to why. It was DNS. It's always DNS. But it didn't work for anyone in there. And of course, as soon as someone pulled out a phone and checked it on their phone that wasn't on the Wi-Fi, oh, it's fine, and it's a problem here. And actually, that was they were able to fix that much quicker, knowing because it's an internal problem. They can phone IT instead of us kind of trying to talk them through it.
But more generally as well, knowing who this problem is affecting matters. So even if it's not within your business, if it's all people in a certain region of the world, then maybe there is some barrier between you and them rather than it being the website itself. So just knowing who it's affecting is really handy, and being able to pass that on to us if we're dealing with it.
Uptime monitoring tools are probably a good thing to mention, like this Pingdom, and Azure has things baked in as well that can alert you when your site's offline, and it checks from different physical locations all across the world, every minute, to make sure your site's responding within the time frame you want, or responding with certain content to make sure you're not serving an error page, for example. You can get notified, and that insight's really helpful for us when we're investigating, because we can go back and look at your historical incidents and see, oh, okay, it's only down for 30 seconds at a time, and actually it's just a timeout. So something's slow, maybe there's something in Umbraco that's holding up the homepage from loading for some reason, or maybe it's when an editor goes in and saves a content change, and that takes a little while to propagate out or something. These are all fixable problems, but it's really insightful to know that. Equally, because it's pinging from all these different locations, you're able to find, is it a geographical issue and it's actually not our server at all, or is it our internal office? Is IT broken the DNS again? It happens.
And if you don't have access to that, so if it's live, actually things like your analytics is useful. It's not the best source of that data, but if it's the only data you've got, it's still really useful, and we can make assumptions based on that, which can really help narrow down a problem.
Yeah, recent challenge we faced on some of these sites at high scale with a truly global traffic profile is where you get an influx of traffic from a certain geography, and it might take a little bit of time for, if using a content delivery network, for example, the local caches to cache all of the different images or content, or it just makes it actually very difficult to be able to cache sites of that breadth, I guess, with lots of images, lots of a true global spread of traffic. Makes it harder. So you've got to have some different strategies then for how you handle uptime and scaling.
Cool. So if someone who's not a client comes to us with a problem, we can either ask them to, or we can rule out, hopefully quite quickly, depending on the data available, whether it's a caching problem, DNS, anything sort of obvious that we've just discussed. If we can't see anything obvious, what are our next steps? Like, what's the process we go through to try to figure out what's going on?
I'd suggest a health check. So health checks are something we do for basically every client coming our way, whether they are intending to stay with us and work with us longer term or not. It gives us a really good opportunity to get an understanding of their code and how the site hangs together and any areas for improvement. And we then turn that into a sort of impartial report that we can send back with 10 to 15 prioritized traffic light, red, amber, green signals to say, these are the things we really think you should be actioning pronto. Might be an Umbraco upgrade, it could be some inefficient code that's directly causing a problem for them, or it could just be improvements, optimizations that will make it easier to maintain going forward. And so that health check's a really good way for us to get that understanding. And if the client's already got a thing that's happening, we can focus our area of research around that. It's only a couple of days worth of work, and we'll use profiling tools and do a thorough code review to identify some of these bottlenecks.
But if there is a live issue going on, we'd always try to solve that way quicker than a couple of days.
Yeah, mitigate first. And then...
absolutely.
And that's where getting access to logs and things like that comes in handy, where we can see historically what's happened or stuff that's happening right now. So that level of access is really useful.
And it's a bit different when it's a client, isn't it? Because we've got processes in place to make sure that we obviously know a lot more about their sites in the first place, because they've been with us a while. We've probably been doing work to them ourselves. We know a bit about what they're doing from a marketing point of view most of the time. and we're familiar with everything. We've got access that we need. So if a client comes to us with a big problem, we are on it straight away. We have the processes in place. They've got their own dedicated email for emergencies. If it's what we call a P0, which is the highest level of problem, so that means your site going down, anything all the way down to payment gateways failing, content not being able to be changed. These are graded in terms of how important they are, but not even that withstanding, we will try to solve things anytime between sort of immediately and again up to 2 days. But for the critical stuff, it's generally within the hour most of the time.
Yeah, I'd love to know the actual stats on it.
Yeah,
but
we should look at the stats.
Anecdotally, it's probably like sub 10 minutes in most cases, because the chances are, if your site goes down, the first things we're going to try is give it a restart, turn it off and on again. The famous trope. It usually works, and then we're able to then spend a bit more time, or it buys us some time to go through the logs and work out and maybe put in place a fix. We did one recently that was a code fix that needed to happen, but the restart actually fixed it, and then 2 days later we were able to roll that out, having it been reviewed, tested thoroughly, and made sure that prevents that issue from happening again. We can be a bit more proactive there and say, there's these things commonly happening in your logs, and that will become a problem at some point, so let's fix that within support retainer. Or
we often come out of these things with a sort of, well, here's the fix for now, here's the improvement for later, and then here's what we need to be doing going forwards. So we actually, having a problem like that means that we can build out a roadmap for preventing these things happening as often in the future.
The thing I love as well about these sorts of scenarios is it could be a process improvement that is the fix. It's not necessarily a code change. Yeah. We've had instances where some people will decide to send an email campaign to 1 million people with no notice and just expect it to be okay. And you then have to have an honest conversation and say, hey, maybe next time, give us a day's warning and we can make sure that the server's ready for that scale of traffic. Or we can put other measures in place, in caching, avoid deployments around that sort of time, etc. It's very enlightening when it's actually a process change and not a technical issue, perhaps.
Well, as well, for like those where it's the email thing, it's important for us to know that it's happening, but also to understand, like be in the conversations with the clients about their marketing strategy, their communications, so that we can, basically spec the site to do what they need it to do beforehand. If they're just going to suddenly start doing that kind of thing without any warning, then chances are we won't have the infrastructure or the approach in place to support that. But if we know that they're going to do that in a month, 2 months time, it's really easy to make sure that we are ready and they are ready, to make sure that it works.
Jen mentioned a minute ago, I think, about defining like what does down mean, and we've had this exercise we've done recently with a client where alongside those P0 through 4 levels of incidents, we've defined sort of what constitutes that and what we can do to make sure that we're mitigating as much risk as possible for P0. So if their primary focus is to give people a phone number so they can call up and book, or a link that they can press to go and book, make a reservation, or buy or inquire, then that should be our focus, not necessarily on keeping the entire application up and running perfectly all the time. Of course, that's the goal, but it sometimes isn't possible, especially if you're depending on third-party systems, etc. And then you set individual SLAs almost for different parts of the application and say, our goal is that the homepage should always load in sub 200 milliseconds. There should always be a phone number available for someone to call, always be a form someone can fill in to contact us. Yeah. And that is what we class as our 100% uptime SLA. You've got to hit those things.
Because everybody has their own needs.
Right. And they are different. I've had clients where they've wanted the exact opposite in both of those scenarios, where they've got infinite resource on the phones, so they can have as many people phone up as fine. We just show them the phone number, that's good. Equally, I've had clients for goodness sake, please, they mustn't phone us. It's the last thing we want, because
we're trying to fix our website.
But there's only 2 of us in the office. We can't handle phone calls, and so then deploying a form that does something else, or redirecting somewhere that solves that problem for the client. And it's important knowing what they need in an emergency.
So in summary, if a client comes to us with an emergency, we have our procedures in place. We've got access to what we need most of the time, and it's going to be dealt with, and hopefully there'll be some learnings from it that we'll take into a roadmap going forward. If you're looking to get some help as a non-client, in summary, we need as much access as possible. We need to have all your logins, not only for the site, but for your hosting, etc., etc., etc. And then get in touch with us. We can talk you through what's going on. You can define to us what's happened, what you've been up to, and we can generally help you pretty quickly, can't we?
Yeah. And crucially, as much of that as possible. So if you haven't got something, we can probably still do something. It's just not quite as quick.